Hello everybody, my name's Michael and I am stepping in for Kevin this time. Those of you who don't know me, well, I'm sure most of you don't know me. I am just sort of a newer Magic player. I started talking to Kevin about a month ago about rogue decks and stuff like that, and it finally got to the point where I started my own Magic channel, recorded some MTGO content, and Kevin thought it'd be nice to have me on this channel and make sort of an exclusive series for him, and I am definitely honored to be here. Kevin was my inspiration to start rogue deck building, and he's definitely helped me a lot in sort of refining some of the ideas I've had with my rogue decks. So definitely thanks to Kevin, and I definitely hope you guys enjoy having me here. Feel free to leave suggestions, comments, or anything like that. I am still quite a new Magic player. I've only been playing for about 5 months, so as a player, I'm still quite new, but I have read extensively on certain like deck building and stuff like that. Deck building is one of my favorite things to do in Magic, and it's probably one of the main reasons why I play. So I definitely hope you enjoy my deck ideas, and I definitely hope you help me refine them, because I definitely want to make them to the utmost viability that they can be. I think that's part of the definition of rogue deck building, is that it's not just sort of your own homebrew, and it shouldn't just be unique. It should be fun, and but it should also be striving for, being as viable as it can be. Still being able to try, at least attempt to stand a chance against the top tier decks. So that's, I think, everyone has a different definition of rogue deck building, but I think that's part of mine, is that, just all my decks are fun to play, and they also strive to be, the best that they can be and the most viable that they can be, regardless of what cards they're playing. So I think I'll just start with a little introduction to myself. I do have my own channel, which I just started a few weeks ago, and I'm sure Kevin will link that in the description below. But regarding Magic in general, I tried playing like a couple of years ago with one of my friends, and it didn't really turn out. We were the only ones playing in our group of friends, and playing against the same person over and over and over again. I'm sure you can guess that can get pretty stale. So it just sort of died out. But like 5 months ago, at my new job, I started talking with a couple of coworkers on the topic, and we came across the topic of Magic, and I figured out that they play it. So we decided to get a small group going, and I asked my friend, "Hey, there's actually some guys at my work that want to play. So do you want to try it out again?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." So we got the Deckbuilder toolkits, and we pretty much went from there, and we started building a pretty solid group to play with. And so that's pretty much where my love for Magic started. So whenever I get into anything pretty serious and get passionate about it, whether it be video games, sports, what have you, I like to read as much as I can about it. I like to read strategy, theory crafting, what's popular, what's not popular, why those things are popular, why those other things are not popular, etc., etc. And that's pretty much what happened with Magic, and I got reading up on all the popular decks and stuff like that, and I eventually came across Kevin's decks and his videos, and I was introduced to this concept of rogue deck building, and I was like, this is something I want to do. I don't want to, play what everyone else is playing. I don't want to have to, copy the best decks online just because they're the best decks. I want to win with my own deck. I want to, have a really, really good quality win, and I want it to be fun. That was were the 3 main things. And, it's just bonus if the deck does catch on or something like that, and it beats out some of the top tier decks. So that's pretty much how I was introduced to Kevin. And then about a month ago, I contacted him with a rogue deck idea I had, and it was inspired by his Immortal Servitude deck with Perforos, and having a lot of 1-drops and then bringing them all back with Perforos on the field and just hitting for a ton of damage that way. Mine was more focused on haste creatures in a more of an aggro route, and then bringing Immortal Servitude back and swinging in with hasted creatures. So it wasn't it's not a very good deck, but the deck was still fun to play, and it, as an aggro deck, it served quite well. It either won by turn 4 or 5, or it just lost pretty quickly after that. So, but it was my first actual rogue deck, and that's when I first contacted Kevin about it, and he helped me out, and just sort of gave some advice here and there. And for the past month or so, that's all I've been, that's what I've been doing, is whenever I came up with a new deck idea, I passed it by Kevin, and he sort of gave his opinion on it, and what things could work better with it. One of the decks I've showcased on my channel, which you can visit in the link below, the description below. I'm sorry. I'm sure Kevin will put my channel in there, and it's my my Izzet's Elementals deck based around Niv Magus Elemental. That deck he suggested Hidden Strings for, and it's gone so well, and that deck's actually proving quite well against even some of the popular decks out there, and it's really, really fun to play. So if you want to check that out, feel free to go check that out, and I hope you guys enjoy that. But yeah, so after talking for a bit and showing him some of the videos I made, because I just started making MTGO content just a few weeks ago, he asked me to sort of make an exclusive series on his channel, and he enjoyed my commentary and thought it'd be a fun thing to do, and I was honored to do it, because I've only been playing for about 5 months, so I'm still quite a new player. I'm still learning quite a lot as a player, and so I think this would be a really, really fun thing for me to do. It forced me to play a little bit more, plus I can just overall make some more videos. And it's been a while since I used to make videos. I used to make a lot of video game let's plays on an old channel, so this was awesome to be able to record things again. And so yeah, here I am. That's pretty much how I got here. I don't think you need to know much else, and apologies if this introduction was a little bit too long for you guys, but I definitely hope you guys enjoy this video and the gameplays to follow. So this deck we're going to be doing a deck tech for. This is an idea I came up with once I saw the Evolve and Unleash mechanics. So I thought this would be a really fun thing to do, and it's turned out actually not too bad. You can do some really fun things with this deck, and I really, really hope that it can at least be refined up to the point where it can be even more, where it can even be better. Most things can always be better at some point. So I hope you guys as well provide suggestions onto how I can sort of make this deck a little bit more efficient. So this is pretty much calling it just my Evo Aggro deck, so Evolution Aggro deck, because it is quite a faster paced deck, and it can play a couple of different ways. So I'm sure you guys will notice that right away. So here's the deck. I've just separated creatures onto the right side and non-creature spells to the left side. So one thing you'll also notice is I play mainly paper Magic. I don't play a ton of MTGO, so I also don't have the funds to get the best cards from MTGO. So I don't run a lot of my decks I have to use Guild Gates instead of Shocklands and stuff like that. So don't worry, I know there are better cards out there for these situations, but I just I don't have the money to spend on it, because I'd rather spend money on, if I do want to use Shocklands, I'd rather buy paper versions of them, because that's what I mainly play. But we are running 22 lands for Guild Gates, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 mountains, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 forests. I'm thinking this is pretty good for now. We're running the 10 forests mainly because of the couple of 2 double green symbols we have in our Renegade Krasis and our Bow of Nylea. Sorry, let me take a drink there. So we'll just run through the creatures first. So for our 1-drops, we're running 4 copies of Experiment 1 and 3 copies of Rakdos Cackler. So I didn't really want Rakdos Cackler as often as I did Experiment 1. I definitely want Experiment 1 as our definite turn 1 play. What this allows us to do is a couple of things. If we have Gyre Sage on turn 2, we can always Gyre Sage on the next turn. And this opens up, like, having Experiment 1 like this and in a deck like this gives us a lot of different options we can do. So for the more conservative route, we can generally do a conservative route with this deck and sort of try and build a board state to just swing in for a ton of damage with Gruul Charm. This also allows us to just play a little bit more safe and have sort of a nice spread of power and toughness throughout all of our creatures. And but we can also play a little bit more aggressively. So for an example, a more aggressive play we could do is turn 1, experiment 1, and then turn 2, Burning Tree Emissary, and use the extra mana to discard a Gorklan Rampager and Blood Rush our experiment 1, and swing in for 6 on turn 2. So that's something we could do because turn 1, experiment 1, turn 2, Burning Tree Emissary evolves experiment 1 to a 2/2, use the extra mana to Blood Rush experiment 1, swing in for 6. So that's a pretty aggressive example of something we could do, and it's really, really effective. To be more sort of conservative, we can sort of gradually build up our board state and then use Renegade Crisis to just keep, to sort of pump up all our guys really, really nicely. So you could turn 1, experiment 1, turn 2, either Rakdos Cackler or Gyrosage. And this is what I like about the Unleash mechanic, is because it enters the battlefield with +1/+1 counter on it, so it evolves our experiment 1 even as a 1, even inherently just as a 1-drop. And Unleash also works well with Renegade Crisis because that Unleash mechanic is counting as a +1/+1 counter on it, just rather than just +1/+1. So Renegade Crisis will further evolve Gorehouse Chainwalker and Rakdos Cackler. Essentially, all of our creatures are going to be getting evolve triggers off from Renegade, other than Burning Tree, and Gorklan and Rebel Belt if we're using these as creatures. Essentially, we're not going to be using these as creatures unless we definitely want a further evolve on something like Renegade Crisis. Essentially, we're just going to be using these for the pumps because they're just so effective in it, and getting extra 4 damage and trample, especially with Gorklan, is just extremely huge. I've won many games because not many people expect a trample pump. So, yeah, I guess I could probably move these, but I just wanted to keep these with the other creatures. So Rakdos Cackler is just another thing we could do to evolve experiment 1 early on. Turn 1, experiment 1, turn 2, Rakdos Cackler Unleashed, and then still have mana up, still have 1 more mana up if we want to do something like keep mana up for a burst of strength or something like that. We have 4 copies of Gyrosage, not much to say there. The evolve fits with the theme, and also adding more mana to be able to ramp into stuff like early Rebel Belt Raider or something like that is just really, really nice, or even just a Gorklan Rampager natural to start evolving even more. And yeah, that's the only reason why we're playing that. With the way Evolve goes, Gyrosage can essentially hit 3/4 pretty early, and that gives us 2 extra mana each time we tap it, as well as being a 3/4, it can swing in for a decent amount and still block a decent amount. Then we're running 2 copies of Burning Tree. We're only essentially running Burning Tree Emissaries for the ability to chain certain things together, because it works well with Gorklan Rampager into chaining into a Blood Rush because of the green and red mana. Or we can always use it to go towards playing a Rebel Belt Raider, which is probably one of our main cards that we want on the field early on. So that's always nice. Or Burning Tree into Gyrosage or something like that. So essentially we're paying for the ability to chain certain things that we need, rather than just sort of its flat 2/2 body, because otherwise it's not going to even matter unless we have a +1/+1 counter on it thanks to Burst of Strength. So we could just play a Burst of Strength on Burning Tree at some point in the game to sort of allow it to evolve with Renegade. Then we're playing Gorehouse Chainwalker. It's just a stronger way to unleash things and evolve them, so a little bit easier way to evolve like a Gyrosage or something like that. So turn 1 Experiment 1, turn 2 Gyrosage, turn 3 Gorehouse Chainwalker or something like that. And then I'll Gyrosage it by that point. It'll be a 3/4, and Experiment 1 will be a 3/3. So by then you can see how sort of evening out our power levels is really, really nice. And then we're running 3 copies of Renegade Crisis. This is one of our key creatures that we need to have it early as well. Turn 1 Experiment 1, turn 2 Gyrosage, turn 3 Renegade Crisis, and turn 4 Rebel Belt Raiders is essentially the sort of the perfect curve that we want to hit. With Gyrosage especially, it's a little bit easier to hit earlier Renegade Crisis and Rebel Belt. So, because essentially once we get Rebel Belt on there at turn 4, Experiment 1 should be a 4/4, Gyrosage should be a 4/5, and Renegade Crisis should be like a 5/4 or something like that. Because Experiment 1, turn 1, Gyro Sage will evolve Experiment 1 to 2/2. Renegade Crisis will come and evolve both of them further. So Experiment 1 will be a 3/3. Gyro Sage will become a 2/3. And then Rebel Belt will come in and evolve Renegade Crisis, which double triggers evolve on Gyro Sage and Experiment 1. Because Rebel Belt will come in, evolve all three of them, so Experiment 1 will be a 3/3, Gyro Sage will be a 3/4, and then Renegade Crisis will be a 4/3, which will also trigger these two. So these will evolve again. So Experiment 1 will be a 4/4, Gyro Sage will be a 4/5, and Renegade Crisis will just stay the same because it puts only a 1/1 counter on each other creature you control. So then you can see how big these things can get if we get a perfect draw. But even then, there's other ways to evolve things, which is what I like about this deck. Rebel Belt, we're running 3 copies of that. I like this card, and it's a really fun card. It's sort of hard to get out there because it doesn't do anything once it enters the battlefield. But if it can actually get attack, if it can actually attack, by the time we get this out, we generally will have at least 2 creatures on the field. Hopefully. And so if Rebel Belt attacks with both those creatures, it'll get 3 1/1 counters on it, so it'll become a 6/6 by attacking. So it can grow extremely fast, and that's one of the main things we really want to do. So this is where we can sort of play a lot of different ways. One of the fun things you can do is sort of grow Rebel Belt. Even if it's attacking with 3 other creatures, it becomes a 7/7, and then after it's done attacking, we can use extra mana. All we need is 2 extra mana to use blood, and then we can use Rebel Belt to pretty much hit a creature for 7 damage, or just go straight to the face to our opponent with 7 damage. So this is why we're running blood. Pretty much is for Rebel Belt once it grows. And once it gets those 1/1 counters, anytime we evolve Renegade Crisis, it will just trigger it even more. But by this point, the evolving generally just stops because we're not meant to pull into the late game we're not meant to pull into the late game. We're essentially trying to make our board state pretty even in power level and swing in with a really big wave with Gruul Charm. Then we have 4 copies of Rebel Belt Maka, just a really nice 1 mana pump for 3/3. That's pretty much all it is. It's rare that we're ever going to play it as a 4-drop. Gore-Clan Rampager will generally be alright as a 4-drop naturally, just because it's a 4/4, so it'll be an easier trigger for evolving. Rebel Belt Maka is only a 3/3 for 4, so we're generally only using this for a 1-drop, or for a 1 mana pump for 3/3, which is why we're running 4 of them. So they're pretty much acting as just stronger versions of Titan Strength, minus the Scry. Then we have 3 copies of Gore-Clan Rampager, just for the Blood Rush mostly, but also using it as a way to evolve creatures as a 4-drop is always nice. Having it have trample is really nice to play on specific things such as Experiment 1, or because that'll generally be one of our larger creatures, or playing it on something like Rebel Belt Raiders to swing in for a ton of damage. Turn 6 or 7, I had the ability to swing in for 18 damage, I think, which was really fun to see. Because we had Gruul Charm, and all of my opponent's creatures were land creatures, so that's pretty much what happened there. So this deck definitely strives on the opponent's inability to actually remove our guys. If they don't have really solid early ways of removing our creatures, we can generally create a nice solid board state with nice even power and toughness throughout all of our creatures, and essentially hopefully get a nice big Rebel Belt going and swing in for a lot of damage with Gruul Charm, hopefully. So that does it for our creatures. We're running 29 creatures, so this is a very creature-based deck, but there's a lot of synergy in between those creatures, which is always nice. For non-creature spells, we're running 2 copies of Burst of Strength. I like this card because it allows us to swing in with some of our creatures and then keep 1 mana up to trick into a better blocker, and it also puts a permanent +1/+1 counter on target creature. So it's always nice if we want to sort of apply another counter to Gyro Sage for more mana, or if we want to put it on Burning Tree so it can also trigger off evolves off of Renegade. So that's why I like it, and it's also nice for those circumstances where we need to just swing out and then be able to still have a card to untap one of our guys to block the next turn, as well as give it another +1/+1 counter. We're running 2 copies of Gruel Charm. This card is essentially just used in the same way Brave the Elements is used in mono aggro decks, is to just sort of swing in with a team and pretty much get a win off that. There are the rare circumstances where we can do 3 damage to each creature with flying. It's nice to deal with those things like Night Veil Spectre or things like that. But mainly we're only going to be using it for the creatures without flying can't block this turn. Then we're running 2 copies of Blood. Again, as I mentioned before, this is mainly used for when Rebel Belt gets quite strong, but it can also use as a semi-way to sort of fight creatures our opponent controls without having them reciprocate damage to our own creatures. So it only does target creature you control deals damage to target creature your opponent controls, but it doesn't have target opponent creature actually deal damage back. So they're not fighting each other. It's essentially you're using your creature's power as a burn. So it's nice on Rebel Belt. It's the most effective on Rebel Belt, but even if we have something like Renegade Krasis who's evolved to a 4/3 or something like that, or Experiment 1 who's a 4/4 or a 5/5, we can pretty much use 2 mana and burn something or someone, because it can go straight to the face to the player for 5 damage. So it's nice in dealing with those creatures that we need to actually burn to get rid of, rather than having them be blocked by our creature or something like that. So it's a nice way to just sort of, there's different uses you can use in Blood, and you can use it as a finisher if you need to. We have 2 copies of Boa Nylia. I just sort of added this just recently, and I really, really like it because it just plays so well in our deck. Having all our creatures have Death Touch is really, really strong, because we are going to be mostly attacking with a lot of our creatures. And it's nice because if we can get a Gore Clan Rampage or Blood Rushed onto something like a really large Rebel Belt, we can make it have Trample as well. And Trample and Death Touch is always nice because you only have to assign 1 damage to a creature for it to actually be destroyed. So then the rest can just go straight to the face. The other abilities are all pretty much relevant too. Maybe not so much the dealing 2 damage to target creature with flying, but in the rare circumstance we might use that. Gaining 3 life is always nice to sort of get back if we absolutely need to. If we have nothing else to spend the mana on, we might as well gain 3 life. But I'd rather just put 1/1 counters on all my creatures, because again, this is a pretty much counter-oriented deck, and it's just another way for us to get counters and make our guys larger. 4 target cards from our graveyard to the bottom of our library is also not something that's really very relevant. But the Death Touch and the 1/1 counters and the 3 life are the main things that we're going to be using Bow of Nylia for. And it only being 3 mana, we can get it out there quite early. Then we have 1 copy of Clan Defiance. I added this in mainly as a finisher, but it's also nice because we can choose all the modes for it. We can deal X damage to target creature with flying, dealing X damage to target creature without flying, and dealing X damage to target player. So especially it's nice because having anything that creates mana with an X spell is always effective. So since our Gyro Stages will essentially be averaging around 3/4s, if we have 2 of them out, that's 4 extra mana towards anything. So it's always nice by the time we have land out, we can essentially make a very sizable Clan Defiance and take out some of the creatures on my opponent's side, or just as well as the addition of going straight to the face and burning our opponent. So there's a lot of things you can do with this deck, and as you can see, there is some nice synergy in between all of our creatures, and it can be pretty aggressive or it can be more conservative. But overall, I really enjoy this deck, and it's proving to be quite fun to play. So I do have sort of a sideboard. I'm still learning how to sideboard properly. I am a newer player, and sideboarding is, one of the more difficult things to do in my opinion. We are running 2 copies of Destructive Revelry, so I added these just because of artifact and enchantment removal, and the burn's nice, but considering its instant speed, only 2 mana, it shouldn't be a problem for us to play it or hold it up if we need to destroy those certain artifacts or enchantments. It's nice to apply to things such as all the weapons or bestow creatures if we need to. We can deal with those. Yeah, things like that. Assemble the legions, any enchantments that, underworld connections, any enchantments that we definitely don't want our opponent to have on the field is what we use these for. We have one copy of Electricity, mainly just for token matchups if we absolutely need to. Dealing with stuff like Elspeth is always a problem sometimes, and being able to wipe all those tokens out of the way is a good thing to have. 4 copies of Lightning Strike, 4 copies of Lightning Strike, essentially in matchups where we have to get more around people. I will generally probably switch out all the Rebel Belt Makas for Lightning Strikes, just for the extra burn, for the extra sort of pseudo removal if we need to, or just sort of straight to the face if we want to be a little bit more aggressive. Then we're running 2 copies of Mizium Mortars. It's nice to have the board wipe later on, and with Gyre Sage it can help sort of ramp into an overloaded Mizium Mortars, as well as just having 2 mana needed to destroy something like a Storm Breath Dragon or a Blood Baron or something like that is always nice to have, or a Loxodon Smiter. It's mainly when we'll switch out into Mizium Mortars. We're running 2 copies of Mutant Spray. This is for when we are encountering creatures that we definitely need to get out, but can't really rely on our opponent attacking into our creatures or them blocking our creatures to be able to kill it. So Mutant Spray is nice because pretty much all of our creatures are going to have +1/+1 counters on them. So it allows us to just do a really, really quick instant speed, 1 mana, pretty much removal almost. Or at least trade in our favor. So that's what Mutant Spray is for. We could have run something like Pit Fight, but an extra mana. I'd rather just play Mutant Spray just because of how many creatures we're running with +1/+1 counters, and I don't want to really want something like Time to Feed because it's 3 mana and it's sorcery speed, and I could really care less about the 3 life. We're running 3 copies of Ranger's Gala for really removal heavy decks. So stuff like Mono Black, things like that have a lot of spot removal, such as Doomblade, Hero's Downfall. We can switch in Ranger's Gal to protect our important creatures, such as like Gyre Sages, Renegade Krasis, and Rebel Belt Raiders. Those are mainly what we're going to be protecting. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Skullcrack is always nice to just have for those life matchups where we can't afford to have our opponent gain life. So again, in those mono black devotion decks where they want to play Gary to sort of swing back into the game, we can at least stop them from gaining life, and generally at that point they'll be low enough that we can just sort of blood rush someone and swing in for the win. Same with sort of control decks where if we can play really aggressively and get them to a point where they have to blow off an early Sphinx's Revelation, we can Skullcrack and then just swing out for the win generally. So only including one, we just need it for that for that certain circumstance where they need to gain life to get back in the game, but we just can't afford to have them. Plus, having it do 3 damage as well is always a plus. It's always nice as well to play it in decks that run stuff like Brave the Elements, because it nullifies protection. Damage can't be prevented this turn, and since our creatures are generally going to be bigger than the other guys, we want our creatures to interact really well with our opponent's creatures, and we can't do that if damage is prevented. So it works around Brave of the Elements, God's Willing, things like that. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the deck, though. I'm really, really having a lot of fun with this deck, and I hope you guys enjoy watching the gameplay that's going to be following this video, because I think Kevin's going to just sort of upload everything all at once. Again, if you have any suggestions or comments about this deck, what you like, what you don't like, then yeah, feel free to leave them below, and I'll definitely take a look at them once the video is uploaded. But thank you guys for watching, and I will definitely talk to you guys later. Have a great day.